guitar intervals, C major, A minor, and related modes. This time looking at the Aeolian mode, otherwise known as the A minor scale, focusing on centering around measuring from the A note located on the bottom thin string of the guitar, fret number 5. This is part number 2. Noting one of our major objectives is to line up all of our resources in the same direction, making them as easy on the eyes as possible from the perspective of the player of the guitar, who is of course located behind the guitar. Therefore, for example, my guitar is going to look like I'm playing left-handed, but no, we just flipped it around to mirror your perspective from playing behind your guitar as though you were playing it into a mirror. Similarly, our Excel worksheet representing the fretboard will have this representing the low or heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling, top to bottom, left to right, situated as though we took our guitar and just imprinted the strings on the screen. We're now continuing our interval practice, focusing around this A note, which is on the 5th fret, and we're talking about the one that's on the bottom, the thin string of the guitar on the high-pitched E string on the bottom of the guitar. Now, as we do our intervals around this note, we are going to be basically in the Aeolian mode, otherwise known as the minor scale, and it's going to be really useful to practice the intervals from the bottom down here because it helps us to build chords around notes as we look from the bottom string up to the top, which people usually are not good at, because remember, the general way that people learn chords, if you look up, like if you just do the simple YouTube search, right, and you try to find different things, how are most people teaching how to learn the chords? Well, you're going to learn the chords in open position typically, and those are going to be what a lot of people are calling cowboy chords that you can play around the fire. Those are great. Those are some of the most fun things to do. And then we typically learn to move those chords up the guitar using what is often called a caged system, taking the symmetry of the shape and moving it up the guitar, which helps us also to visualize the guitar, naming those positions on the guitar from the shape that is being covered, noting that the shape conveniently covers 4 to 5 frets. Why? Because that's how the guitar is designed, so that we can reach things within 4 to 5 frets. So it's not a coincidence that we can nice and neatly, or fairly neatly, cut the guitar into 5 sections that line up to our 4 fingers approximately, because that's what they tried to do. So that's what we often do. So then we move up the guitar, naming the shapes possibly with the caged system, and then we start to really focus on 2 chord constructions when we move up the guitar, that being if I'm on the top string, if I'm looking from the top string, it'd be in the E major shape. So if I had an E major chord down here and I moved it up to right, like up here somewhere, E major bar chord, or the E minor. If I had the E minor, I use the E minor. Those are our bar chords. So you might not even hear them called an E minor shape or an E shape. You're just going to hear it called a bar chord from the top, a major bar chord or a minor bar chord, and that's basically moving up the shape of an E major or E minor. And on the 2nd string, we learned the A shape, which would be an A shape looking like that. We move it up here. That would be our bar chord on the 2nd string, or an A minor shape, which would be a minor shape here. So boom. So that's what we typically learn, right? We learn, okay, I know my open positions. I'm going to move up the fretboard. I really only need 2 shapes to really play everything I need to, at least in terms of triad chords. That being the bar chords on the top of the string, which are going to be the major and minor bar chords, which are basically moving up from a caged perspective. Again, the E major and E minor. And on the bottoms, on the 2nd string down, I learn the bar chords from the 2nd string, the A string, which are going to be an A major and A minor bar chords. So, and then that allows me to move up the guitar by just basically knowing the notes on the top 2 strings. And all of the strings below it then are just kind of along for the ride, right? I don't even know what's really happening down there. I just know this top string is an A, and I play that bar chord, which is a minor bar chord, and boom, all the rest of the strings line up. Okay, that's great. But what if I want to play like something at the bottom of the guitar, just like a triad chord? Why would I want to do that? Because it sounds different, right? It sounds different, and these big bar chords aren't going to be as good when you're trying to layer things on top of each other, because someone else is already playing this heavy E string, such as the bassist if you're in a band or you're trying to play multiple tracks on top of each other. Therefore, you'll find a lot more utility. You'll be a lot more versatile. You can do a lot more things and play with a lot more people if you can play in different registers on the guitar. Therefore, learning the bottom of the guitar is quite useful. Easiest way to construct chords is, one, you can just take the shape apart and say, what's the bottom of that shape? And I can try to figure it out down here and say, well, there's a little A down there because that's the bottom of the bar chord. But that's not perfect. That's not the greatest way to do that, because if I just say this is the bottom of the bar chord, like, I can't really know that if it actually has the notes in it that fill the requirements if I don't know the actual relative positions. Like, I can see that that's the bottom of the bar chord, but without me being able to say, to look at which note is the A and what's the fifth and the third related to it, I might not be able to know that that still fills all the requirements, has a 1, 3, 5 of the minor chord. Whereas if you learn the intervals, you can build not just the shapes that happen to be there from the bottom of the bar chord, but any basic shape from the bottom here. So that's kind of what we're working on. Why can't people do this well? Because they can't say the musical alphabet forwards and backwards too easily, and they can't recognize the notes on the bottom of the guitar as easily as the top two strings, which we can help us by looking at it by shape. And we can't measure intervals from the bottom of the guitar as easily as looking at top to bottom, because we always just practice top to bottom, or most of us do. Again, if you look at tablature and you've learned guitar like from tablature, you might start looking at the guitar from top to bottom because that's how you read, and for some reason they flip the tablature upside down, which always drives me crazy. It's like, I don't want to look at the little string on top. That's not how I look at the guitar from behind the guitar, personally. Maybe I'm a little dyslexic, maybe I'm a little weird on that, but I don't think I'm totally weird. I think that's like normal. But you probably have a lot of worksheets that have the little string on the top of the guitar, and you might have learned from top to bottom like that, right? But I think most people don't, right? So that becomes a problem. And if I learn the intervals from the bottom of the guitar, I have to look at the inverse distance. And so that's a little bit messy. And the fault line, this part of the guitar shifts forward. So there's a difference in the tuning between these two strings. That's a problem. Most people don't even know how to count between the strings. So most people don't even, and I'm not trying to criticize here, because the guitar, we learn the guitar by shape, right? So I didn't know that, like, until when I was learning guitar, I wanted to learn the shapes and move all the shapes around. So I wasn't sitting here counting the intervals either, even though I'm an accountant messing with a guitar. But it's highly useful to know the distance from position to position, whereas on a piano, you're gonna do that all the time. Like, if you played on the piano, it would be like one string on the guitar that just keeps on repeating over and over into higher or lower octaves, depending on which way you are going. And therefore, you're gonna start to really see, oh, I see the intervals clearly. This is the 1, 3, 5, because I'm playing on one string in essence, and that becomes very clear. But when you're on the guitar playing on multiple strings, then that isn't as clear. What is clear is the shape. You're like, oh, I recognize that shape. That's what makes sense. But if I could recognize the distances, then that would make it easier. How do I do that? Well, I need to know the distance between the guitar from string to string, so that I can measure how long the distance is, and I need to know what the intervals actually mean, right? When I say it's a third, it could be a major third is 4 notes away, a minor third is 3 notes away. Again, on a guitar, most people don't think like that. What do? They say, oh, the shape looks like this for a major, like the third is like that for a minor, and like this for a major, right? I know the shape, but I can't tell you how far away in notes those two strings are, right? So it'd be easier if I could count it out and tell you. I could prove it, right? I could say, well, why is that? Well, it's just the shape. Well, that's one way of proving it, but I'd also like to be able to say it's 4 notes away. That's what makes a major, which again, on a piano, the piano players intuitively know that. You can see it. It's obvious because it's on the same string, right? If I do it on the same string, it's obvious, right? Okay. So that's going to be our general practice. remembering that the minor, this is basically the Aeolian, which is the minor scale. And we have a tendency in Western music to disassociate the major and the minor as though they're two separate scales that do two different things, and they're not actually modes related to all the other modes, but they are modes related to all the other modes. So we kind of want to keep that in mind. I'm going to try to go in a little bit as I go into my intro here, and before we get into the intervals, describe some of the concepts I've been thinking about from the prior couple presentations where we were looking at the major modes, in particular the Mixolydian mode, asking the question, why would I want to learn the Mixolydian mode if I want to play mainly in the major scale and minor scale, right? That's one question. And another question would be, how can I move through like a 1-4-5 progression in Mixolydian, adding like the 7, if the 7 isn't in each of the progressions? And we came to the concept of, well, you can either kind of move through the progression as though you're going to be playing the same shape, which means you're going to be outside the key in the same shape, or you can be inside the key, but then the shape's going to change. So those are the two kind of choices that we had. And then we started to think, well, I can apply that concept possibly even outside all the major notes, which we saw in Mixolydian, because the 1-4 and the 5 of the Mixolydian isn't even a major scale, it's a minor scale. So what we did is we jumped to the 1-4-5 and made it a Mixolydian 1, Mixolydian 4, Mixolydian 5. We just converted it to Mixolydian on the 1-4-5, right? And then we started saying, well, we could do that even on the ones that aren't majors then. I could start visualizing myself in this shape, but then I can start using kind of rules as to when I can break the rules, right? And I compare that to, like, again, if you're in grade school and your well-meaning teacher keeps telling you all these rules that you can't say this or do that, but then when you say this or do that and you do it the wrong way, like we was robbed, right? We was robbed, right? It's like, well, that saying kind of became somewhat well known for a time period. Why? Because he said it wrong. If he said we were robbed, then no one would remember what he said, right? But you get some attention if you say we was robbed, right? I mean, so you can break the rules on purpose, hopefully, right? Knowingly break the rules, and that probably wasn't a knowing breaking up. That was just the way he talks, right? But those are just conventions, like wherever he was from or whatever. Whoever said that, I think it was in a boxing match or something. But the idea is you can break the rules on purpose, and that's going to draw attention to it. Similarly with music, we're saying, okay, we're in key here. You got to play everything in key. We've got all these chords that we will construct that are in the same key. But you want to break, when can you break the rules? Breaking the rules is like saying we was robbed. It's going to draw attention. And the question is, is it good attention or bad attention, right? And that's dependent in part on taste, right? Someone's going to say he sounds like he's ignorant or something, and other people are going to say, well, it sounded cool or whatever, right? And that's just how it works, right? But the question is, in terms of practice, is like, when can we kind of break the rules? So I want to kind of apply that same concept a little bit more on the minor scales now that we're on them. So remember the general rule. If I go up top here, we've got normally the major scale is just the Ionian mode from a modal structure, and then we can compare all of the other major scales to them, that being the Lydian and the Mixolydian. They only have one interval difference. And then we can look at the mode that's opposite or the most different from the Ionian, and that should be, in theory, the Aeolian, which is the minor scale, right? Because you're saying the major is on one side, you would think that the minor scale would be completely opposite, as different as possible, have as many intervals different as possible, you would think, right? And well, that's the general idea. Now, it's not really the case in practice, because the minor doesn't actually have a minor second, whereas the Phrygian does. So the Phrygian is actually the most opposite, it seems to me, from the major, but the minor is the one that we use most often, so that's the one we want to compare to. And it's a good comparison because once I learn the intervals of the minor, I can compare the other two minors to it, which is the Dorian and the Phrygian, which will only have one interval difference. Now remember, why is this useful to do? It's useful to do, of course, if you want to be playing in different modes, because if I'm in the Aeolian, if I'm in the major scale, then I would like to be able to play in Dorian, or in our case now, the Aeolian, which is the minor scale. And so I need to know this to some extent, of course, simply to play basically in a minor scale, so I can play something different. But as I do that, I don't want to think about it as I'm doing a totally different thing. I'm just playing the same notes as some related major. In this case, the minor A minor happens to be the same notes as its related C major. I'm just really focusing around a new central point, that being the A, that's going to be like the tonic. So that's going to be the general idea. So then as I go through, like if I'm playing in C major, then like we say, I think it's most common like in the blues, when you start adding the 7, that you start to see, okay, if I go to the 1, 4, 5, then all I really need to know is those are major keys if I only play the 1, 3, 5 of the chord, the 1, 3, 5 of the C, the 1, 3, 5 of the F, the 1, 3, 5 of the G. But if I start adding the 7, it's going to get messy, because now I'm recognizing that the 7, the 1 has a major 7, the 4 has a major 7, but the 5 has a minor 7. So now that brings the question of, what do I want to do in that case? Do I want to play the same 7 on the 1, 4, 5, all major 7s, or all minor 7s, which will give me the same shape on the guitar, but we're going to lose the fact that it's going to be in the same key. So that's the trade-off that we're kind of working with. So do I want to play something parallel shape-wise, or do I want to stay in the same key? And you might alter between the two as you're kind of doing the same thing, right? It's going to come up with a different sound. The blues tends to lean towards, in my opinion, the shape being the same, and then sacrificing the fact that you're going out of key, right? But it still sounds good because the parallelness of the shape is my general take on that. So then let's apply that same concept. So that means if I go to the 4 and the 5, how do I know when the 7 is a major 7 or a minor 7? Well, and the same is with the 9, the 11, and the 13, which is equivalent to the 2, 4, and 6, the evens that we skip. If I want to add those to a chord or some kind of rip that's in the 1, 4, 5 progression, how do I know when I get to the 4 or the 5 which ones I can add if it's not just going to align up to a major chord and a minor chord from the perspective of just the 1, 3, 5, right? And the way we do that is we could say it's basically a modal chord. We could say, well, what I'm playing, I'm usually going to be playing something in some kind of modal chord. So the Lydian is taking all of the same notes, but putting it in terms of the Lydian, right? Counting every other note from the perspective of the F that is in the key. And you come up with a Lydian. So if you know that, then you're going to start to know the intervals that are different and when you're going to be playing something out of key or in the same key, right? So I think from a blues standpoint, like one way to approach it is if I didn't know that, right? If I don't know the stuff, what would I do? I'd say, well, I'm just going to do a parallel construction, right? And right here, and then I'm going to move the same shape up and down. And it might be out of key. I'm not really thinking of being in key, maybe, right? I'm just kind of guessing on what I would do and what I have done, right, in certain situations. Like, I'm not really thinking about being in the same key. I'm thinking that I'm on this shape and then I'm on the other shape that's similarly constructed, and the ear picks up on the fact that they have a similar construction. The intervals are the same distances away, even though they're not in the same key, right? I think that's kind of the gist of maybe like how your mind might be thinking when the bluesy thing came about, right? You start thinking, I'm just going to start building shapes that are the same from here to there. I go from this note to the next note, and then I play the same shape over it. I would think would be one way that you kind of start building on things. But that's the general idea. So let's look at the intervals. You have a perfect first, 2-note away major second, 4-note away major third, 5-note away perfect fourth, 7-note away perfect fifth, 9-note away major sixth, 11-note away major seven. if I compare that to the minor scale, otherwise known as the Aeolian mode, we would think that the perfects would remain the same as they do, and the minors would be flattened, meaning moved down a step. The majors would be flattened to a minor, which they are for the three, 6, and 7, but not for the 2. The 2 still has a 2-note away major second. So that's how we can kind of memorize the minors. Now, the other thing we can kind of see on the minors, which I think most people do just naturally, is they say, well, on the minors, like with the major scale, the 1, 4, 5 happens to be the minor modes, which is great because now the 1, 4, 5, I can play kind of a blues in the major, which is, I can define, one way to define would be I play a 1, 4, 5 in a major scale, and then I can play the blues in a minor Aeolian scale, the minor scale, which is a 1, 4, 5, which has all the minors. So that's convenient that it works out that way, but it also kind of leads us to not really think about, well, how the major is related to the minor as much, right? So what I'm trying to do here is say, okay, I'd like to name the modes so I can see the relative positions as they compare to the major, right? So if I have the relative positions 1 through 7 of the minor, we start on Aeolian, which I'm going to call absolute mode number 6. So I'm going to call it a modal chord in essence, or it's a mode of the 6 related to the major, and that kind of helps me to see, well, what is the 3? What is the 4? Let's say, well, the 4 I know is a minor chord because again I have a 1, 3, 5 that I'm going to be building, and the 3rd is minor, but I want to know that whether it's Dorian or Phrygian, basically, right? And I can kind of count it out by saying, well, if I'm looking at 3 notes down from here, what I'm going to do is take the 4 and say it's 3 notes down, 4 minus 1 is 3, and then we're going to add that to the mode that I started on, which is 6. So that'd be 6, 7, 8, 9. There's only 7 modes, only 7 notes in our scale. So 9 minus 7 is 2, mode number 2. Now, I know that's a little tedious to do, but that helps us to identify that I'm really playing, when I play the Aeolian, I'm playing what I would call absolute mode number 6, Aeolian, absolute mode number 2, Dorian, to absolute mode number 3, the Phrygian. Why is that useful? Because now I know that the Dorian, I can go beyond, once again, the 1, 3, 5 to the 7, 9, 11, and 13. If I know the distinct intervals of the Dorian for the 7, 9, 11, 13, making the same kind of judgment call as to whether or not I want to play something that has parallel construction, which would be similar to me going to the 1, 4, 5, or in this case, the A chord to the D chord to the E chord, and either staying in the same key, which means I'm using the intervals for a Dorian chord and then a Phrygian chord, or do I want to go from the 1 to the 4 and switch it from a Dorian to an Aeolian? So instead of playing D Dorian, I'm going to play D Aeolian or D minor scale. Why does that matter? Well, it doesn't matter if you play the 1, 3, 5, but it's going to matter when you get out into the 7, 9, 11, and 13. In particular, the 6, which is equivalent to the 13, has a different one. On the Phrygian, it might be easier to see. When I get to the Phrygian, I can either play, when I get to the 5, which is what I would call absolute mode number 3 chord, right, which is the Phrygian mode, I can either play a Phrygian modal chord, or I can play a minor E minor. Why is that different? Well, the 2, which happens to be equivalent to the 9 in chord construction, has a flat 2, right? So it wouldn't matter if you are playing in Phrygian or Dorian if you didn't play the 9 in a chord standpoint or the 2 related to this E major. But if you do, if you build a chord that has that 2 in it, then you come up with the same question as we do in the blues construction with the 7, which is, again, do I want to build my chord that has parallel construction, switching the 5 which is mode number 3, Phrygian, to a minor E, or do I want to change the shape to accommodate the 2, or in this case, or the 9, right? And that means the shape will be different. Let me give you like an idea, a little bit of an idea of this. Like if I was on this A, right, and we're doing this in a minor construction, so like this is one way to play the bar chord. Like here's the bar chord for an A minor. But if I take this bit, it's easier to see because you could see, like, let me do it this way here. So here's the root, and above it is the 5th, and then the 3rd is the one that we're really focused on because that's the difference between a major and a minor. If it was a major, we would have a 4-note away major 3rd versus a 3-note away minor 3rd, right? And so notice what would happen. Like one thing I can do here, of course, is I can do any half step I want. So if I was noodling around here, I could slide in to the note with a half step, and we saw before that I can slide in the whole chord even. Right, you could slide in the whole chord. So that tells us a couple ways we can break the rules, basically pulling in some of the notes that are in the white area, which is going to call some attention again, because now you've stepped outside the rules. You said we was robbed, right? And then if you take this and go back and say, well, what if I went to this G chord? This is a G chord with a parallel kind of construction right there on this G chord, and it would look like this because you have a flat, right? Now you have a flat here. And then if I brought it back to the F is a major chord in our, so if I stay within the lava, I don't go outside, I don't break the rules, it's right there, right? And so, so notice if I go back in a progression like that, I want my ear to be in A minor, G. I switched to be in the same key, F, major, and then maybe I go to E minor, back to A. But what would happen if I'm like, what if I said I want to be on the same construction? So I'm going to say, well, what if I just like forced this to a minor construction, right? I'm like, oh, what if I just like, I should be playing this, but I'm going to play it back here so it has a parallel construction. So I'm going to go from this shape on the A and just move the whole shape back. And I'm going to recognize it's out of key on the 3rd, but I'm going to keep it parallel, right? So now it's like, and then E minor, and then maybe I add the major 3rd because I'm going home. So notice that's a little wonky now, right? Because it's like I should be in the key of A, but then you played like a G minor, which should be a G major, and an F minor, which should be an F major, and then there's an E minor. That makes sense. But then you converted it to an E major. Why would I convert it to an E major? That's the traditional thing to do oftentimes because this one that's out of key leads home. Remember that leading tone. So switching the 5th, which in this case is an E, to a major is quite common. So that's like so those are a couple things just to keep in mind, right? So if I'm playing here, 2 ways I can do this. I'm in A minor to G major, F, E minor. That's in the same key versus, and then second time around, maybe I switch it up and do a parallel construction, go into the minors. G minor, E minor, E major. sounds kind of Spanishy. That's the Spanish progression, by the way, where it's like goes to A minor, G major, to F major, to E major. That's the one that's out of key, but it leads back to the minor. You can play that progression this way, which is the fast one. But then if I do the minors, so the other thing you can also kind of lead into, the other thing I was kind of playing with is the half steps, right? So I was doing a half step like with that one note. But then the whole shape. But you could walk up chromatically up as well. So what if I just say this is my destination, but I'm going to walk up chromatically from like here and use the same shape, which totally doesn't fit in the key because these two notes don't fit, but I'm going to walk up home going half step, half step, half step. So instead of just going half step from here home, I'm going to go from here, right? And that kind of works even though like I started where these two notes aren't in the same key, and then I went up to here where this note isn't in the same key, and then these two notes aren't in the same key, but then I landed home. So because I walked up chromatically, even with the same, well, the whole shape is the same, it kind of works, you know, so if you're noodling around. So those are just a couple ideas that are you know, ways that you might kind of break the rules a little bit and then make it sound a little, you know, which draws attention, right? People either like you or hate you when you draw attention. Like, oh, that was nice, and then other people's like, I'm gonna end you. I'm gonna end you right now for doing something outside the rules like that. That's not how we. Anyway, I'm gonna end you. All right, let's go ahead and let's do a quick joke before we move on. Joke practice. You know what? I made an epiphany lately. An epiphany. Because I like saying pithy stuff, you know, as well as playing music. So I was like, what I should do is I put my pithy lyrics to music, making an epiphany, which is like a pithy symphony. So pithy symphony, I call it an epiphany. My epiphany is gonna change the world. Just like that idea I had about a belt buckle, which also has a watch on the belt buckle, and I called it a waste of time. A waste of time. It's the belt because the belt goes on your waist. It has a watch on the belt buckle. We made a special one for Joe Biden, making sure the back of the waste of time was waterproof, the front ice cream resistant. Joe Biden protests to the nanny. I don't need waterproof, dang it. I don't need waterproof. I know water when I see water, not needing to prove it at all. Why? Because I run on intuition, baby. Waterproof. I don't waste my time trying to prove things scientifically. If I don't know how something works, I don't run a test to figure it out, to prove it. But I just ask science incarnate and Dr. Fauci. I actually know science personally. I know science personally, and then I just ask science incarnate what the answer is. I don't need to prove nothing waterproof. For example, I'm pretty sure my waste of time is broken here because it always reads, oops, too late o'clock. Too late o'clock. Apparently it would be more helpful if we've replaced the waste of time with just like a dampness detector. You don't really need a watch. You don't need a watch. You just need a dampness protector. You know, if Joe Biden had one of those during the presidency, we'd probably be a lot better off, I feel like, right now in any case. Back to focusing in on this A. Last time we left off on the 3-note away minor third, so that's where we'll pick it up this time, remembering that the third is a very important interval, it being the defining interval, the distincting interval, is that a word? It's the distinctifying interval of a chord or a scale, because the third is going to be the one that defines when we make a chord, if it's going to be a major chord or a minor chord, and therefore also will be defining if we make a full modal chord, which we can call a scale or a mode. The third is the one that will tell us if it's a minor mode or a major mode. Now note that the minor third here, of course, therefore doesn't come up as often. We haven't been measuring it as readily as we have with the perfect fourth, the perfect fifth, because the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth are more often there in both major intervals and major modes and minor modes. Whereas, of course, the thirds are going to be split almost evenly between the major thirds and the minor thirds for the major chords and the minor chords, although the minors are actually winning because you have a minor third with the weird one, the Locrian one as well. All right, so this 3 represents the third position in the scale that we're working on, and this 3 represents that it's 3 notes away. You know, I'm also trying to think that it might be useful to try to also identify the notes in the shape as part of our practice. So in other words, this interval, this 3-note away minor third, can also be said that it's the interval from mode number 6 Aeolian to mode number 1 Ionian, right? It's the interval between the Aeolian and Ionian. And the reason I think that might be useful to try to memorize or try to get in our mind is because no matter what scale we are in, that will always be the case, right? If I was in a different scale over here and I made a chord from the Aeolian, I think it would always be the case that if I go measure the distance between whatever the related Aeolian is and the Ionian, then that distance is going to be a 3-note away minor third. So I might try to work that into my thought process here. But so that is that. Now, when on a chord construction, notice that we still have the 1, 3, 5. I don't need to name it different because it's an odd interval. Therefore, we're good there. Okay. So and I also might try to really distinguish where the major third is to compare and contrast the major thirds and the minor third, remembering that if you're in a blues situation, usually the minor third is flattened. So you might like go up to the major third. You don't typically do the same thing in a minor. Go from a major to a minor third, but you can. Why? Because that's a half step. So I wouldn't think of that as a normal convention that we do all the time, going from the minor third to the major third, but it is still a half step. So it still works. So yeah, I throw it in there. So anyways, that's going to be, if I go to the minor third, it's going to be 3 notes away here. The major third would be back over here, 4 notes away, and then it would be flattened. Remember, when we're measuring on one string, it's kind of like if I was on a piano, except there's no black notes that are the distinguishing notes. As if the black notes were the same shape as all the other white notes, then that's basically, like a piano situation. right? So that's going to be that. So we're going to have from A to A. Whoops, I'm on the wrong string. 3-note away minor third. All right, so let's go above it now. If I go above it, I have to take the inverse distance. So if it's 3 notes away, then the inverse of that is 12 minus 3, or 9. So I'm looking above it for a 9-note away distance. So this is the one where a lot of people don't know the distance between the notes or the strings. The distance between the strings is 5 usually, except when we cross the fault line. And remember, when I'm thinking convention, my convention that I'm trying to set my mind in now is when I move upwards, then of course it's when I go from B to G that I cross the fault line. And when I go downwards, of course, it's when I go from the G string to the B string. And it's easier for me to visualize that this continent, as if this is a fault line, this continent, this tectonic plate, moved to the left when I'm going up, because that makes it easier for me to see the shift in my mind instead of seeing the thing that I'm on shifting. It's easier to say the other thing shifted and I stayed still, right? Like you would in physics. The other guy's moving. My point of reference is the one that's the right one. It's easier to see that way. And then if I'm going from the top, it's not exactly correct. Either one could shift. It's just your point of view, whatever. But I'm where I'm at, and that's what it looks like. So that's what I'm going to do, because it helps me to get my intervals faster. And then if I go from top to the bottom, I'm going to say the bottom continent shifted to the right. I think that's an easier way to visualize it personally. Okay. So then I'm going to go, so I'm looking for 9 notes away. So the distance between the strings is 5. So I call it -5 when I go up. This direction is negative, so -5, -6, 7, 8, 9. So there it is from this A. I'm going to go sig -5, -6, 7, 8, 9. So if I went from top to bottom, it's a little buzzy on there. I need to fix my guitar, but it is what it is. It's kind of bugging me. Why is it buzzy like that? I need to fix, no, I don't, it's okay. So top to bottom is a 9-note away major 6, and therefore bottom to top is going to be a 3-note away minor third. So if I go up 1 string, then the 3-note away minor third will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets back, unless, but did I say it was a 9-note away? Like when I went from top to bottom, it's a 9-note away, right? Major third, and bottom to top is a 3-note away minor third, therefore. So if I go up 1 string, the 3-note away minor third will be 1, 2, 3, 4 frets back, unless I cross the fault line, which would only happen on this B string, in which case if I was on this A and I went up, it would be over here. Now it's a further distance because here's my root, and here's the tectonic plate, which I'm visualizing shifted to the left. So that means it took my destination away from my starting point, because the starting point doesn't move in our physics context, because when I look at it from my perspective, you're the one that moved. And that's fine for what I'm doing right here, and it's easier to visualize that way, so that's what I'm going to do. And they're going to say, but I moved. And I'm like, whatever, dude, because I don't care what you think. You moved, and I stayed the same. And then down here, so that's going to be, that means the rule is if I go up 1 string, the 3-note away minor third is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 frets back, unless I cross the fault line, which only happens on the B string, in which case if I go up 1 string and cross the fault line, the 3-note away minor third is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets back. All right, and then of course, by the way, the major, this was flattened, so that means that the major third would be out here, and then we flattened it back. Okay. I won't mess with that right now. Let's go up to the next one. All right, we're going to go up 2 strings and cross the fault line. I'm looking for a 3-note away major third. Therefore, I'm going above it. Therefore, I have to take the inverse distance, which is 12 minus 3, or 9. There's a distance of 5 between the strings unless you cross the fault line. So it goes 5 to here. But then I cross the fault line, and this tectonic plate shifted to the left, therefore towards the back of the guitar. Therefore, to go a distance of 5, I have to go diagonally. I want to go distance of 5 because I don't want to count in 4s, because I'm not that good at it, even though I'm an accountant, because I use computers, okay? We're not in the Stone Age of, like, you know, the 80s. This is like we've got Excel sheets here. So in any case, it's going to be 5, 10, and then back here to 9. All right, so this is going to be 5, and then we're going to go, because this shifted this way, 10, and then -5, -10, and then I go 9. Boom. So it's on the same. So if I went from top to bottom, it would be a 9-note away major 6, but from bottom to top, it would be therefore a 3-note away minor 3rd. Where's the major 3rd then? The major 3rd is going to be out here because we flattened it. So you could try like if I made this is the bar chord because that's the 5th right there. So you could try the half step back or try the whole thing. Got to pick that A up at the bottom. Anyway, okay. So that means if I go up 2 strings and cross the fault line, the 3-note away minor 3rd is on the same string. But I wouldn't cross the fault line if I started above it on like the G string. So if I was here and I went up 2, I would be here. So the general rule is if I go up 2 strings, the 3-note away minor 3rd will be 1 fret forward unless I cross the fault line, which would happen if I started on either the B or the E string on the bottom of the guitar, which is the 2 times that I would cross the fault line out of the 4 times, which I would have the opportunity to go up 2 strings and not like run out of strings unless I go around the top of the guitar. And therefore, if I went up 2 strings and crossed the fault line, then the 3-note away minor 3rd would be on the same fret. Okay, let's do the next one. We're going to go up to the next one. This is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 3 strings forward, crossing the fault line, 3-note away minor 3rd has an inverse distance of 12 minus 3 or 9. So right above it is a distance of 5. This tectonic plate shifted to the left. So if I want to count up another 5, I have to go diagonal this way to 10. And then up here to 15, there's only 12 notes in the musical alphabet, so I always have 15 minus 12 as what comes up all the time to bring it back down to -3. And then when I go this way, I go back towards the 0, -3, -2, -1, -0, or octave. I can also say it's 12, around the horn, 12, 11, 10, 9. Okay, that's quite a distance. So if I count it from here, it's going to be 5, and then this tectonic plate shifted this way, so 10, and then 15, and then 15 minus 12 is 3, -3, and then 3, -3, wait a second, que paso here, I did something funny, didn't I? No, that's right, 3, -3, -2, -1, -0, so octave, or 12, and then 12, 11, 10, 9. Whew, that was different. That was difficult. So from this C to A, that would be a 9-note away major 6, and therefore bottom to top would be a 3-note away minor 3rd. Whew. All right. So that means that if I go up 3 strings, the 3-note away minor and cross the fault line, the 3-note away minor 3rd would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets forward. We don't do that often because that's a bit of a reach, but it's still doable because 5 frets is about as far as you can reach with the hand. But if I didn't cross the fault line, which would happen like here, for example, and I went up 3 strings, then it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frets forward, which is basically out of reach, which also means it's going to be 6 frets back. So that's the one that's kind of we don't use most likely all the time because it's a bit of a reach on that one. So we're going to say if I go up 3 strings, the 3-note away minor 3rd is going to be 6 frets forward, which means it'll also be 6 frets back because it's right in the middle, unless I cross the fault line, which would happen on the bottom 2 strings, the B and the E string, which are the 2 out of 3 strings. I could actually still go up 3 strings because I have room to do so. So if I went up 3 strings and cross the fault line, the 3 note away minor third will only be 5 frets back because this tectonic plate shifted to the left, bringing the root destination closer to my root position. Okay, let's go to the next one. We're going to go up here. So we're going to go up 4 strings, crossing the fault line. We have a 3 note away minor third has an inverse distance of 12 minus 3, which is 9. So a distance of 9. So we're going to say 5 going here, and then this tectonic plate shifted to the left, so we go diagonal to get to 10 here, and then 15, and then I'm going to bring it back down because there's only 12 notes in the musical alphabet. 15 minus 12 is -3, plus another 5 is going to be 8, and then going this way brings it up to 9. All right, let's try that from the bottom here. So I'm going to say this is going to be 5, and then this move this way, so 10, and then 15. So 15 minus 12 brings it back down to -3, plus another 5 is going to be 8, and then 9. Boom. So this C to A would be a 9 note away major 6 from bottom to top. Therefore, would be a 3 note away minor third. So if I go up 4 strings, I will always cross the fault line because I can't go up. If I started above the fault line, I don't have enough strings to go up. That's why. So if I go up 4 strings, I always cross the fault line, and therefore the 3 note away minor third will always be 2 frets back, baby. All right, let's go up to the top one. Now, if I go to the top one and I'm on the bottom string, what am I going to do? I'm going to cheat, right? I'm going to cheat. It's not really cheating because it's like I just know a different way to do it that's easier. So I'm going to do it that way usually, where I'm going to say, oh, a 3 note away is right there on the bottom string. If it's on the bottom string, it's the same as on the top string, right? But let's count it out just because we want to practice our counting. We're looking for a 3 note away minor third, and so we have to take the inverse distance, which is 12 minus 3, which is 9. So right above it is 5, and then because this tectonic plate shifted to the left, we have to go 5, 10 this way, and then 15. 15 minus 12 is -3, plus another 5 is 8, plus another 5, which we don't often do unless we go up 5 strings. 8 plus 5 is 13, which I could bring down. 13 minus 12 is -1, bringing it down to 0, or 12. 12, 11, 10, 9. Wow, that was a distance. Let's try to count it without the cheat sheet. So it's going to be 5, and then this shifted this way for 10, and then 15. 15 minus 12 is going to be -3, plus another 5 is 8, plus another 5 is 13, but there's only 12 notes in the musical alphabet, so 13 minus 12 is 1, and then I can bring it, and then 1, I bring it back to the octave, which is 0, or 12, going around the horn, 12, 11, 10, 9. Or I could have been at 13 here, right? When I was at 13, instead of bringing it down to 0, I could have said 13 down to 12, right? 11, 10, 9, if I want to think about it that way. But I like bringing it back down to 0 these days. That's how I think is the easy. Every time I'm over 12, I just bring it down. I bring it down, subtracting 12 from it, which only happens if I get 15, or possibly very rarely if I'm traveling distance of the whole 5 strings, you get to that 13. 13 minus 12, 15 minus 12, that's all you need, because you're always going to hit 15 and 13 if you count it up that way. Any case, if I go from top to bottom, that would be a 9 note away major 6, bottom to top, therefore, would be a 3 note away minor third. So if I go up 5 strings, which is rare to do, I will always cross the fault line, because I can't go up 5 strings without crossing the fault line. I got to go into 2 tectonic plates. I can't stay on the same plate. I have to go to a different territory and be a stranger in a strange land. And that means that if I go up 5 strings, the 3 note away minor third will be 1, 2, 3 frets forward. Now, just to note that the same string is up top, right? So if I thought about going around the horn, you could do that, but you have to repeat this string. So if I was on this string would be repeated just from, I'm not looking at octaves, just from like if you're going around in a circle in terms of the notes. And then if I went below this string, right? Just to measure below it. Remember, I wouldn't have to take the inverse distance. It wouldn't need to be a 9 note. It would just be a 3 note away, minor third, distance of 3. 5 is right below it. So 5, 4, 3. So that's the normal distance we're used to for a minor third. If I go down one string, in other words, the 3 note away minor third will be 2 frets back unless I cross the fault line, which in this case going down would be if I start on the G string, right? If I was on the G string and went down, then because this, I'm thinking about this as my focal point, then I'm going to be thinking that this tectonic plate is the one that shifted to the right. So what happened? It closed the distance, right? I'm looking from the perspective of where I am isn't moving. The thing that I'm looking at is moving, not because that's necessarily true, but because it works for what I'm trying to figure out, and it's the easiest way to visualize it, right? So I'm going to say this, and you're right, because I think this earthquake analogy is the easiest way to visualize it. Maybe that's because I'm from California and I have an earthquake mind or something. If you want to think about it like a hurricane or something, a typhoon, the typhoon moved this way. I don't know, but I feel like the earthquake tectonic plate thing, we all live on tectonic plates. So it's not just me because I live in California. I feel like everybody can like relate to the tectonic plate thing, even if yours isn't moving. Okay, any case, let's tell another joke, and then we'll do the next one. This one, joke practice. Lately, I've been working on wisdom, and I find it's often best to break the project into sizable chunks. So when I'm working on wisdom, at this point, I've mastered the second part of wisdom. I've mastered the second part, but I'm still working on the first part, which is difficult because I don't know what whiz is. If I knew what whiz is, then it would be easier to work on the first part of wisdom after I've mastered the second part. I thought maybe it was like taking a whiz. You know, people say taking a whiz, but that can't be right because then wisdom could basically be defined as taking a whiz and missing the can, right? That would be the pinnacle of wisdom in that case, taking a whiz and missing the can. And if that was correct, then the being with the most wisdom in the world would be either Joe Biden or my dog. You know, it's like, you know, Biden standing at the can attempting to take a whiz is like, oh crap, I can't do this while eating my ice cream cone. Quick, somebody help me get it out. Get it out. Oh no, it's too late. Dang it. This is the messiest pullout since Afghanistan. See, that can't be what wisdom is, right? I mean, okay, moving on to the next one. We're looking at the 5 note away perfect fourth. So it's a perfect fourth, not a perfect fifth, but the distance of a perfect fourth is 5 notes away. That always messes me up. I'll probably say it wrong multiple times as we go through this because it's easy to think that if it's 5 notes away, it should be a fifth. But no, it's a 5 note away perfect fourth. Okay, so this 4 represents that it's the fourth of our scale, and this 5 represents the distance from the root note in our scale, which in this case is A. Now, I also just want to note that I didn't do it last time, but I'm trying to think how I can work in also thinking as I do this, like that the distance between the Aeolian mode number 6, the beginning of mode number 6, is going to be the same as, or the distance between it and mode number 2, or Dorian, the distance from Aeolian to Dorian will always be a 5 note away perfect fourth. And I have a whole nother section that I've went over, a course that I talked about, like the shapes, and I talk about the idea that we should be, when we see these shapes, we see these particular patterns, right? And you should, you should be able to basically recognize the pattern, and I can name each of the notes. So whether I'm thinking about myself in Aeolian, Locrian, Ionian, Dorian, I'm using the same notes in the same pattern, and I can name the notes basically as the modal position instead of the relative position, right? So in other words, like this A is currently, of course, the first of the scale I'm working on, the Aeolian mode, the minor scale. But it's also, from the perspective of a modal perspective, it's the Aeolian modal note, right? Or I could call it the modal note number 6 when I use my absolute numbering system, right? And if I looked at this C, then from the perspective of the minor, the A minor, that C is the third. But I can also see that C as it's the Ionian, right? It's the first note in the Ionian. So I can call it the start of the Ionian mode. I can call it basically the Ionian note within my shape. Why? And that why is that useful? Because then this shape, no matter what mode I'm playing in, I can identify each note in the shape by its mode, right? Starting from that mode. So this C, I can identify it as the Ionian mode. That's where the Ionian mode starts. It's the Ionian note that would, if I started this whole same shape playing the scale from here, I would be playing in Ionian. And you can see that note is always in the same spot. I call this the house analogy. It's in this box. It's always in the top right of the box, if you look at it that way, right? You might say, what about here? Well, the tectonic plate shifted this move to the right. So here's the box from here to here. It's just that it got shifted, but it's always in the same spot, right? So if I'm able to see that, then I can start naming the intervals and say, well, what if I went from the Ionian note, right? Or what if I'm measuring from the A in this case, and I measure from the A note, which is the Aeolian note, to the D note, which is the Dorian. So I'm measuring from the start of the Aeolian to the start of the Dorian, which, again, I don't really want to see I don't want to see what's the distance between A and D, because that's not movable. What is movable is that it is looking at the Aeolian note in the shape, whatever shape it is, whether I'm playing in Aeolian or minor scale or any other, the Aeolian to the Dorian will always be, no matter what, if I'm playing in the C major and related modes or to G major and related modes, doesn't matter. If I find the Aeolian note within that set of notes, and then I find the Dorian, there's going to be a distance of a 5-note away perfect fourth. I'm almost positive of that. I mean, that's right. And so I'm just thinking about this on the fly as I go here. So I haven't really rigorously thought this through, but I think that works. And I think that would be a useful way to see it. So I'm going to start maybe thinking like that. But okay. So then we're going from this A to this D, 5 notes away. Okay, so I could count out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where's my orange? Here, so boom. So on the same string, like it was a piano, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Boom, boom. So that's about as far as I can reach. Wait a sec. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out here. Sorry about that. It's like, what? That don't sound right. All right, and then we're gonna go up 1. So we're gonna, what happened now? We're gonna go up to here. Okay, so I'm going above it. So it's a 5-note away, but, well, by the way, because this is the fourth, it's not included in my normal chord construction because it's an even number and we skip it. We go from the 1, the 3, the 5, and then to the 7, last note, and then we go around the horn to a 9. So the 5-note away perfect fourth could also be called a 5-note away perfect, or a 5-note away perfect ninth from a chord construction standpoint. All right, so if I go above it, I'm looking for a 5-note away perfect fourth or a 5-note away perfect ninth. I have to take the inverse distance because I'm going above it. So a distance of 5, 12 minus 5 is 7. So that means the inverse of the 5-note away perfect fourth is, of course, the 7-note away perfect fifth. So when I'm going above it, this is where it gets confusing. I'm looking for the 5-note away perfect fourth, but I have to look for a distance of 7, 12 minus 5, which is equivalent to the 7-note away. So don't get those two things confused, even though we're looking for the inverse distance and they're inverses of each other. And you have this 5 here and you have the 5 there, which is confusing. So it's going to be 5 distance right above it and then 6, 7. So if I count it from here, we're going to say 5 here and then 6, 7. So from top to bottom, that would be a 7-note away perfect fifth from the perspective of the D, bottom to top, would be a 5-note away perfect fourth from the perspective of the A, and therefore if I go up one string, the 5-note away perfect fourth will always be 2 frets back unless I cross the fault line, which would happen if I was going from the G string, the B string up. So if I was on this A and then I went up to the D, now notice what happened. Here's my root, and because this tectonic plate, I visualize it, because when I go up, I visualize this plate as the one that's moving. It moved to the left, and that made a larger distance. It moved away from me as I'm standing here on A. So the general rule is that if I go up one string, the 5-note away perfect fourth will be 2 frets back unless I cross the fault line, which would happen on the B string, in which case if I go up one string and cross the fault line, the 5-note away perfect fourth will be 3 frets back. All right, let's go up two strings up and across the fault line. So I'm looking for a 5-note away perfect fourth, or a 5-note away perfect ninth, and I have to cross and I have to go above it. So inverse distance is 12 minus 5, which is 7. So a distance of 7. So a distance of 5 right above it, and then this tectonic plate shifted to the left, so I have to then move this way to go to another 5. I call that -5, and then I go down towards 0 this way, so -5, -4, -3, -2. What happened? This is, wait, no, that was 10. 5, 10, and then 9, 8, 7. There we go. All right, so if I'm up here, it's going to be -5. The tectonic plate shifted to the right. -10 going this way brings me back towards 0, back up towards 0. -10, -9, -8, -7. So from here to here, so that D top to bottom would be a 7-note away perfect fifth. Bottom to top, therefore, would be a 5-note away perfect fourth. So that means that if I go up 2 strings and cross the fault line, the 5-note away perfect fourth will be 2 frets forward. But I wouldn't cross the fault line if I was starting above, like on the G above here. Then I could go up 2 strings and totally not even cross the fault line. So in that case, so normally, if I go up 2 strings, the 5-note away perfect fourth would be 1, 2, 3 frets forward, unless I cross the fault line, in which case, if I look from the perspective of this A, this tectonic plate shifted to the left, making it a lesser distance because it moved closer to me. So therefore, if I go up 2 strings and cross the fault line, the 5-note away perfect fourth will be 2 frets forward. Let's go up another string, going up to here. So here's the long distance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 5 this way, so let's start there. So this is the one that's possibly just out of reach most of the time, so we don't use it maybe as often, but we're looking for a 5-note away perfect fourth. Distance of 12 minus 5 is going to be 7, distance of 7. So 5 here and then 10 here because this tectonic plate shifted to the left. So we're going to go a distance of 5, 10, and then 15 above it because there's no tectonic plate there. 15 minus 12 is going to be -3, and then I go more negative this way, -4, -5, -6, -7. Let's count it out actually on the guitar. So we're going to say -5, tectonic plate shifted this way, so I go diagonal, -10, -15, and then 15 minus 12 is going to be -3. -3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So open D. So if I went from the open D to the A, that would be a 7-note away perfect fifth. But from the bottom A to D, therefore, is a 5-note away perfect fourth. Okay. So that means if I go up 3 strings, the 5-note away perfect fourth will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets back unless I cross the fault line, which would happen on the G string. If I started here, I wouldn't cross the fault line if I started above the G string. So I can't go here. So I have to look at the A like up here. So I have to go way up here. All right, and then let's just to get an idea of this. And then I go up 3 strings. So the general rule would be if I go up 3 strings, the 5-note away perfect fourth will be 1, 2, 3, 4 frets back, unless I cross the fault line, which would happen on the bottom B and E string 2 out of 3 times, that I could actually go up 3 strings and still have strings to go up 3 strings. So in which case, if I go up 3 strings and cross the fault line, due to this being my focal point and therefore the tectonic plate, this one being the moving one, going to the left, making the destination longer, the 5-note away perfect fourth, which could also be called the 5-note away perfect 9, will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets back. All right, repeat that 10 times. We're going to go to this one then, up 4 strings. Looking for the 5-note away perfect fourth, which could also be called the 5-note away perfect 9th, and we're going above it, so we have to take the inverse distance. 12 minus 5 is 7. Distance of 7. So going between the 2 strings, that's going to be a distance of 5. This tectonic plate is shifting to the left, so I have to go this way to get to 10, and then 15 right above it. Only 12 notes in the musical alphabet. 15 minus 12 is going to be -3, plus another 5 is going to be -8. So 8, and then we go this way back towards 7, back towards 0 to 7. Count it out on the actual guitar. So we're going to say this is going to be 5, and then tectonic plate shift this way, 10, 15. 15 minus 12 is -3, plus another 5 is going to be 8. 8 minus 1 is going to give us the 7, boom, boom. So top to bottom, from the D to the A, is going to be a 7-note away perfect fifth. But if I go from the A, bottom to top, therefore the inverse of 5-note away perfect fourth. That means that if I go up 4 strings, I will always cross the fault line, because I can't go up 4 strings unless I start from a string that's below the fault line, because I don't have any room if I start from the G, and therefore, if I go up 4 strings, always crossing the fault line, the 5-note away perfect fourth will always be on the same fret, which could also, by the way, be called the 5-note away perfect 9 from a chordal construction standpoint. Let's go up to the top string and close this one out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so top string, if I'm on the bottom string, I'm gonna cheat, but it's not cheating. It's not cheating. I'm just doing what I know is easier. We can say that if I look, I can say that it's 5 notes this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that means it's going to be the same up top, because those notes are the same, although different octaves. Okay, so, but let's count it out just to practice our counting. So it's going to be the long distance. So I'm looking for a 5-note away perfect fourth, which could also be called, so I have to look for the inverse distance, which is 12 minus 5, or 7. Going right above it is 5. This tectonic plate shifted to the left, so I have to go this way to get to the other 5, 15, or 10. And then going up 15, 15 minus 12 is going to be -3, plus another 5 is -8, plus another 5 is 13. 13 minus 12 is 1. I'm going to call it -1 plus 1, bringing us to 0, or 12, around the horn again. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. Whew. All right, let's try it from the bottom. Let's say this is 5, tectonic plate shifted this way to 10, and then 15. 15 minus 12 is going to be -3, plus another 5 is going to be 8, plus another 5 is going to be 13. 13 minus 12 is -1, minus 1 brings us to 0, or 12, because that's the octave. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. There we are. So from this D to that A is going to be a 7-note away perfect fifth. From the A to the D, therefore, would be a 5-note away perfect fourth. That means that if I go up 5 strings, which I don't always do, doesn't happen a whole lot, then, but I would always cross the fault line, and the 5-note away perfect fourth would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets forward. Now, if I was on, this string is the same as the top string, you will recall. So if I just repeat on the top string, and what if I went below it? Like you might ask, well, what if I go below this string? I don't have any strings, but I could go around the top of the guitar. But this string, if I do that conceptually, this string isn't below it. This string repeats. It repeats, and then we go below it. So looking from this distance below it is kind of the same as looking below this string, right? This string is repeated. And if I went below it, I wouldn't need to look for a the inverse distance, I would say it's a 5-note away perfect fourth, a 5-note away perfect ninth. I only need to look for a distance of 5. There's a distance of what I call positive 5 right underneath it, so it would be right there. So it would just be from here to here. So that would be a 5-note away perfect fourth or a 5-note away perfect ninth, and therefore from bottom to top would be a 7-note away perfect fifth if I measured from the D. So if I'm going below it, one string below it, the general rule would be that it's going to be, it would be on the same fret unless I cross the fault line, which would happen on the G string. So if I was on this string, it would shift here, right? So if I go below it for one string, just for example purposes, I'm looking for the 5-note away perfect fourth or 5-note away perfect ninth, which would be, if I go down one fret, would be on the same fret unless I cross the fault line, which would only happen on the G string, in which case if I go down one string and cross the fault line, the 5-note away perfect fourth, which could also be called the 5-note away perfect ninth, will be one fret forward.